Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Randonautic. Let's get right into it. How often would you say you think about the end of all of this? Do you never think about it? Do you think about it sometimes? Like when you watch a bit too much of the news? Can you just not get it out of your mind for the life of you? Is it constantly nagging at your survival instinct at the back of your mind? Maybe you even fantasize about it all going down the drain, to the point of preparing for it. What if I told you that the collapse of our society wasn't just a possibility? What if all these prepper nut jobs or all the billionaires buying those bunkers actually weren't just paranoid? What if it's not a possibility, but an inevitability? Well, all things must come to an end eventually, don't they? Even this incredibly amazing and honestly horrifying thing we call society. Our infrastructure, healthcare, the supply chain, the economy, the government. Will all of these things someday just go away? The real question, and definitely the more pressing one, is not if or even how, but when, and more specifically, now. Since our society isn't the first, and hopefully won't be the last, we can learn from history and make an educated guess on if it really is our turn on the empire's chopping block. The main society, from which we'll be drawing comparisons to our own today, will be the Roman Empire. Most commonly known today as the thing men think about, the Roman Empire was an ancient civilization centered here in the Mediterranean and extended throughout the civilized world. Known for its impressive political and social structure, military conquests, and cultural and technological advancements. Or, if you don't like big words, it was a big and powerful state a long time ago, famous for its soldiers, roads, and rulers. Like this guy, or this guy, even though it was really big and really cool, kinda like us, it crumbled. When exactly is debatable, and depending on who you ask, it fell in the 5th century, when the Western Empire collapsed, or it lasted until the 15th century in the form of the Byzantine Empire. There also was the Holy Roman Empire and the Ottoman Empire, and I am sure you'd find someone calling themselves the real successors of the Roman Empire even today. But for our purpose today, we will focus on the first one. The OG Roman Empire spawned from the Roman Republic, when the good old Julius Caesar became a dictator, after which his adopted son Octavian was granted special powers by the Roman Senate, making him the first emperor and becoming Augustus. Fun fact, these two guys are why we have the months July and August. Bring that one up in your next social interaction. I am sure everyone will be very impressed with your knowledge of history and not asking themselves, who invited this guy? Now that we got that out of the way, what do I mean by our society or civilization? Well, for this video, I'm going to be focusing on the West, meaning mainly the United States and countries in the US sphere of influence, like the member states of NATO and other countries or allies that have been westernized. Basically, countries that are deeply culturally, ideologically, and economically tied to the United States, but mostly the US. Also, countries whose whole defense policy is to ask the great US of A for help. Americans not having free or affordable healthcare is all fun and games until your country gets invaded. Anyway, you get the idea. But how are we going to compare the Roman Empire and the modern Western civilization to figure out if we are also about to... Well, that's a great question. I am so glad you asked. Fortunately for me, Lieutenant General Sir John Clubb analysed the life cycle of empires in his essay, The Fate of Empires and Search for Survival, which coincidentally was one of the inspirations for this video. In this essay, the Lieutenant General not only said that the average lifespan of an empire is about 250 years, or 10 generations, but he found remarkable similarities between them and described them in 6 ages. The age of pioneers, the age of conquests, the age of commerce, the age of affluence, the age of intellect, the age of decadence, and as the cherry on top, there's the collapse itself. Why don't we go through these ages, see if we can spot some similarities, and figure out if we are on the right, or more accurately, on the wrong track. But before we do, let me share something with you. If you're up for diving deeper into the topics of today's video, Audible is hands down the best way to go. With countless books and podcasts on the rise and fall of empires, and even our own society, there's plenty to sink your teeth into. Plus, with the 30-day free trial, which you can find linked in the description, you can start exploring for free. And if you're more of a physical book person, then you should definitely support your local bookstores. But if you can't be bothered with that, good old Gigacorp Amazon has got you covered too. I really appreciate your support for the channel. Now, let's get back to the show. The Age of Pioneers is a pivotal period in the history of an empire, characterized by exploration, expansion, and the acquisition of new territories. It's a time when societies embark on journeys into uncharted lands, driven by the desire for discovery, economic opportunities, and strategic advantages. This age lays the foundations for future growth and development, setting the stage for the rise of great civilizations or the expansion of existing ones. In Rome's Age of Pioneers, the city kicked off its journey in 753 BC, starting as a small settlement. This era was all about laying the early bricks for what would become a mega-empire. Rome wasn't just settling, it also did a bit of strategizing, making allies and planning conquests. It's the chapter where Rome showed its grit and ambition, setting the stage for its historical spotlight. For the West, the Age of Pioneers began with Europeans setting sail in the late 15th century, hungry for new lands and trade routes. Fueled by the human desire for adventure and that sweet, sweet gold and spice. A guy by the name of Christopher Columbus, who surely needs no introduction, discovers a whole continent. Much to their and the native population's surprise, this was a game of Age of Empires with much greater stakes than you crying after losing thanks to the trade monopoly, because you focused on pimping out your base a bit too much. No, this one laid down the complex web of today's world dynamics. Of course, this is true for the Roman Empire as well. Empires usually don't come into existence through people from very different cultures singing Kumbaya around a campfire. Unfortunately, reality is a bit less Disney and a bit more Game of Thrones. Next up, we got the glorious time when civilizations thought, that land over there sure would look nice with our flag on it. That was the Age of Conquest, the era of empire building through might and more might. Empires bulked up, flexing their influence like they were trying to impress a 3 in a club at the end of the night, swapping cultures and tech in the process. A process that again could get messy. Rome and the US respectively playing the grand game of who can expand their backyard the fastest. Rome, starting as a city-state, went on a Mediterranean shopping spree without asking, acquiring Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia. Fast forward to the US in the 19th century, catching manifest destiny fever, believing it was their God-given right to stretch from sea to shining sea, often at the expense of anyone in between. And yes, this was the root-shooting Texas Ranger with the big iron cowboy times filled with bank heists, train heists, casino heists, alcoholism, and tuberculosis. Both empires showed a knack for acquiring territories, blending cultures, willingly or not, and leaving behind a complicated legacy of power plays. Imagine Rome after Augustus became the first Roman emperor establishing peace through the Pax Romana, bustling with trade, from the Mediterranean to the Silk Road. This was the Age of Commerce, a grand bazaar filled to the brim with fine wine and fabrics, expensive oils and spices, silk, precious metals, and pottery. And of course, as you can expect from the savages that they were, none of which came wrapped in 3+ layers of non-recyclable plastic packaging. Pathetic. In this age, the great US of A, which became the world's piggy bank after World War II, was booming with innovation and industries that set global trends. like stocking hidden caves with billions of pounds of cheese.
The government is hiding billions of pounds of cheese in hidden caves underneath the United States that it is selling off by manipulating our advertising and education systems to our detriment in order to turn a profit.
Not to mention the space race and landing on the moon, unless you don't believe that we did. But I really can't imagine why you wouldn't trust the government's word on it. Both epochs are tales of economic savvy, where prosperity was the name of the game and the marketplace was their arena. A time when wealth wasn't just accumulated but flourished, showing the world how peace could indeed be profitable. A peace that came at a price mostly paid by your enemies, with getting the sun dropped on them a couple of times, or the trophium. The age of affluence was when Rome and the USA decided what they did until now was cool, but not cool enough. That simple luxury was just too basic. Rome threw itself a centuries-long party, building the Colosseum, as they should, where the public would go watch the unfortunate brutally meet their end in various ways before the invention of live leak. Sprawling villas? Check. Banquets and feasts that make a Thanksgiving dinner look like the school lunch? Absolutely. You may have even heard the myth that Romans used to vomit so that they could continue feasting, but if you think that impressive, then what if I told you the Roman Empire might not have been too far from an industrial revolution? With rudimentary steam-powered devices like the Aeolipoli Heroes engine, structures like the Barbagal Mill Complex, and even, and this is a personal favourite, devices like this literal ancient computer called the Antikythera mechanism. This incredible device was discovered in a Greek shipwreck in the year 1901. And okay, it may not have been created by the Romans, but they could have possessed some, unless all of them were destroyed or lost when the Roman Republic conquered the Greek city-states. But come on, how could I not include this? The ancients had computers, for fuck's sake. You have to admit that is sick. Meanwhile, the USA responded to post-Cold War prosperity by inventing the internet and buying houses like their prices are going to increase by orders of magnitude in the next 30 years. Right. Dot-com bubbles and smartphones everywhere and computers that were more powerful than ever. Truly, both were golden eras of go big or go home. The age of intellect in Rome wasn't just a blip, it was a full-blown renaissance before the Renaissance. Picture the forums buzzing not just with politics, but with debates on philosophy, theatres echoing with new plays, and poets spitting straight bars. This was the era of big minds and ideas, where the likes of Cicero and Seneca were dropping quotes that students would groan about millennia later.
Mr. Smith, why can't we learn about something more interesting?
Silence, children. Your minds must be burdened with the ponderings of dead men.
Jump to the USA in the late 20th century, and it's like the country said, "Hold my crack pipe," to the concept of progress. Suddenly, it's all internet startups in garages and phones in your pocket, more powerful than the computers that got us to space. Education's booming, with universities churning out the next wave of thinkers and creators, unlike today.
I'm already black.
Setting the stage for an era where knowledge is power and innovation is the currency. Point is, this period showcases civilizations at their peak brain power, making strides in understanding the world around them and shaping the future in the process. Unfortunately, this peak of peaks, this golden age, would not last forever. As they say, all things must come to an end. The word decadence is defined as moral or cultural decline, as characterized by excessive indulgence in pleasure or luxury. Or you could say that things were just a bit too good for a bit too long. And due to a lack of an immediate existential threat, the people turn to increasingly more extreme sources of pleasure, or just make up problems so that they feel like they are doing something with their lives. That's basically what the age of decadence boils down to. A period of time in the empire's lifespan marked by moral and cultural decline in a society and a detachment from societal responsibilities, leading to internal weaknesses and eventual downfall. Now, you might be thinking that this sounds a little like the age of affluence, and you'd be correct. They do sound very similar, but they aren't the same. The key difference here is that to the age of decadence, the age of affluence really were the good old days. People remember how great things were, and the empire has this last squeeze of greatness in order to relive those days. They remember that they used to be and feel great, and they don't feel that anymore. So maybe this lost greatness is still out there in the best art, like music or films, the best cars, or the best clothes, or the best food. A strange common trope here seems to be making celebrities of the chefs. The Roman, the Ottoman, and the Spanish empires all did this, and so are we doing the same today. This period is when empires start showing their age, and they insist that they are fine on their own, and they don't need any help getting off the toilet seat. Let's speed run through some of the other signs that an empire is in the age of decadence, shall we? Overextended military. Rome stretched its forces thin across vast territories, with soldiers not even being Roman citizens, and so being loyal to their commanding, and most importantly, paying officers more than the empire itself. The United States in particular seems to start or support new wars, like they're trying to rack up XP. Wealth disparity. In both Rome and the West today, the gap between the haves and the have-nots grows larger. We can see that in the doubling of the wealth of the elite class during the big bad virus time we can't speak of. Not to mention the shrinking middle class, if there even is one, by the time I get this video out. Living off the state, Rome faced issues with public welfare dependency. In the United States, debates over welfare, entitlement programs, and taxes paying for your bags of fudge rounds reflect similar concerns. Currency and economic issues. Towards the end of the empire, the Roman denarius devolved into little more than a silver-plated bronze or copper coin. Similarly, the United States has been off the gold standard since 1971, and especially recently, the inflation seems to be out of control. Obsession with sex. Let's just say that the morals of the Roman public somewhat relaxed over time. As for our society today, you can hardly go a day without being slapped in the face with objectified women in advertisements and music, or someone who made their sexuality their entire identity, expressing it on the street. Not to mention the internet. Today, about a fifth of all mobile searches are for porn, and 4% of websites are estimated to be porn. Over 10,000 terabytes of porn. This is about 66,667 copies of GTA 6 for PC, according to the game's estimated size. That's a lot of degeneracy way too readily available to anyone with an internet connection. Not to mention what all that porn does to a developing mind. This societal obsession is preceded by a sexual liberation, which takes place before the age of decadence and very well might negatively affect men's masculine nature. It doesn't seem like there's a consensus among scholars regarding this topic, so you are more than welcome to inform me in the comments, and I know this is probably way more complicated than I'm making it out to be, but it does make sense. I mean, which society would you rather die protecting in a war? One whose values are built on virtue and meritocracy, meaning a society governed by people selected according to merit, where people will treat the soldiers that return home like heroes? Or one who's not like that, and instead of being treated like heroes for protecting it, a significant portion of the women whose freedom you paid for with your blood use it to say you are inheriting oppressing them just by breathing the same air? Moving on. Political corruption. Corruption plagued Roman politics, and at the end, all the senators that really did, at one time, represent the people were only interested in representing how much of the country's wealth they could take for themselves. But fortunately, none of our political leadership would ever fall to corruption and betray the people they are supposed to serve for monetary gain.
Stop the cap.
Open borders and migration. Rome dealt with integrating diverse populations, with a significant portion of the army not being composed of actual Roman citizens. For the wider Western world, let's just say that not protecting the border against or even allowing illegal immigration for millions of people that don't like the way your country is and having no expectation of them to integrate might not be the greatest idea. Not to mention the national security risk posed by that country's enemies exploiting this obvious opportunity. Then there's the drug and weapon smuggling and the human trafficking. All that not good stuff an open border makes way easier to pull off. Distraction of the populace. The people of Rome were constantly being distracted by the gladiatorial events and endless circuses to take the people's attention away from the empire disintegrating around them. The gladiator games, for example, could involve more exotic animals and elaborate combat, like that the arena would even be flooded so that extravagant naval battles could take place. And do I even need to talk about our own distractions? I mean, look where you are right now, on a platform where every minute there's 500 hours of content being uploaded. Just in the span of this video, more than a year's worth of videos have emerged on just YouTube alone. And then there are all the shows you want to keep up with, lest they could get spoiled to you. And the movies you wanted to go watch, and all the sports and video games and news. God, the news. Maybe there's a new hit single from your favorite artist that you haven't listened to yet. How about that viral video or some drama on TikTok? Oh, never mind, there's a new one. Oh, and a new one, and another. How often are you just present in your own body with your own thoughts? Maybe a couple minutes a day. Are you ever? Or are you just too endlessly entertained to realize the barbarians are indeed at the gates? Could you even tell? At this point, all of our dopamine receptors must be so damn fried that the whole collapse might even sound entertaining. Okay, let's slow down a little. Right now, you might be thinking that it's not looking so great for us. So, what now? Are we at the end of the road for Western society? Should you invest in a bunker? Is it the end for the great empire of the United States of America and the rest of the West? Well, as you may have noticed by my wording, even though our society seems to follow in the steps of a dying empire, there is one crucial difference that I so far did not mention. USA and the countries in its sphere of influence are not an empire. Sure, we may share some similarities, but we are not one and the same. Don't get me wrong, our society is definitely decadent as all hell, and it does seem to get worse by the day, but that does not guarantee that the whole thing is just going to implode out of nowhere and take all of us with it. We can look at our counterpart accompanying us throughout this video. What happened to the Roman Empire after the collapse? You might remember that it split in half, and sure, the Western Roman Empire fell in the 5th century, leading to its fragmentation into various Germanic kingdoms, but the other half became the Byzantine Empire and thrived for another 1,000 years. And yes, the worst-case scenario is obviously catastrophic, but it's not the only path we can take. I can't tell you which path it's going to be, or give you a step-by-step guide to getting ourselves out of the mess we've made. But we'll surely need to make some drastic changes to, at the very least, keep kicking the can down the road for at least a couple more generations. A good start would probably be to stop poisoning our environment with microplastics, forever chemicals, heavy metals, and other pollutants. Or maybe not let ourselves be ruled over by people so old you wouldn't trust them to drive a car. Or maybe, and this is going to be just a personal opinion, so take it as you may, but maybe we could look back at the values on which the most prosperous, safest, and the most equitable society ever conceived was raised upon. I know it wasn't perfect, but no society is. I know there were horrible things committed in the name of expansion and profit, and let's never forget them, but bad people do and will go on doing bad things. That's not going to change. And Western society is the one that outlawed slavery. It is the one which lowered infant deaths to record numbers. It's the one which raised the most people out of poverty, no matter what your liberal professor would like you to believe. It's the society that almost eradicated tuberculosis, the White Death, the biggest killer of humans in the history of our species. It's the one that reached space, the final frontier. And I don't know about you, but I'd like it to be the one that spreads humanity across the stars. So let us not forget the bad, but let's also not dismiss the good. And even if you're not the slightest bit religious, even if you don't care for God, don't also make the mistake of dismissing the source of the values that got us this far in the first place.